The contention is that the system didn't work. It didn't work. I don't think there's any argument about it. But I go one step further, and I maintain it can't work because it's a flawed system. The argument goes that if we have to use the system, what we have to do is get more money, more people, and more efficiency. So the money will come, the people will come, and you'll promise more efficiency, and the congressman will say, we got to be more efficient. But my argument is that the approach is completely wrong. There is always a cost that we don't talk about. There's a money cost, but of course there's a cost to regulation that injures businesses. In the Depression, the SEC actually helped prolong the Depression, and Sarbanes-Oxley didn't do anything to prevent this from happening, and we've been in a slump for a long time. So regulations aren't the solution. But does that mean that we have to be soft on on fraud? No. Fraud we have to really crack down on, which we seem to ignore. But too often we have these regulations out there that sort of protects us and say, oh, the SEC will take care of us. We don't really have a responsibility. A good analogy to this is where people are safe in their homes. The least safe place in this country is where the most laws are and the most policemen are, in the inner city. The people who are the safest are the ones who assume responsibility for themselves, have their own weapons in their home, and live in rural areas, and there's no policeman within miles. So that whole attitude is completely different. But the point I want to make and get you to respond on is in some areas we don't do it this way. We don't preempt with regulations. If we deal with habits or religious cults or intellectual pursuits, we're very protective of the First Amendment and say, oh yeah, a lot of harm can come from it, but we're never going to regulate you. When it comes to the press can do a great deal of harm to any one of us, and frequently politicians suffer from libel and slander. But we never go and say, well, what we need is prior restraint to make sure nobody's ever injured. But we don't do that. We assume there's a recourse, and we don't because there's a cost. There's a loss of liberty in that sense. Because if we have people snooping around on everybody's habits and anticipating it, then we have lost something. But on economic issues, all of a sudden we say, oh, this is okay. We can do this, and there's never a downside. But what I don't understand is why don't we treat economic liberty the same as we do with personal liberty and religious liberty, intellectual liberty? We even have the First Amendment split in two. We talk about intellectual freedom of speech, but commercial freedom of speech needs regulation. But why is this not a unit? And so my question to you is, don't you have any doubts whatsoever that regulations aren't the answer? Why is it that we couldn't monitor ourselves and our system with a determination to prevent fraud and deal with the fraud and the corruption and the Ponzi schemes within our own system? And pyramiding debt contributes to this. The financial system that we manage is our fiat system contributes to it. All the insurance programs that we have teaches people that it's okay, and we allow this moral hazard to occur. So instead of this being the answer, I see this as the problem, the cause, and not in a personal sense, because I think people who work at the SEC are probably as determined as anything, but I think you have an impossible task. You might say, oh no, and you might be able to come up with some examples. We did A, B, C, and we protected such and such. But we could do that if we monitored religion and said, look at what we prevented. Do you have a comment on this and why we couldn't treat everything equally?
Sure. I don't go into this with any preconceived notions that increased regulation or increased resources or increased individuals is the answer. I mean, what we need to look at is a holistic and comprehensive view as to whether the SEC can respond appropriately. So I certainly wouldn't go into the process thinking that the answer is a particular matter, whether it's increased regulation or increased individuals. We need to look at the process, as you say, and see if the SEC is able to do the job that it needs to do.
The budget for the SEC probably doubled in the last 7 or 8 years. I think in 2001 it was about $400 million, and now it's over $900 billion. And the personnel went up about 20%, but we had like a 100% increase in the budget. Where did that money go if we didn't hire more people? Do you have a general idea on where most of that money went if it wasn't for hiring more personnel?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not that familiar with the overall budget of the SEC. I could talk more about our office. But certainly we need to look at where money went and whether there were additional people or what was used with the resources.
Do we do contracting out? Could that have been hiring individuals where they were not called government employees? Do you think that might have been part of it?
There is some contracting out in the SEC, yes.
Thank you very
Back.
much.
Thank you.